Do you think UFOs, the paranormal, weird history, cryptozoology, and outsider art are pretty darn cool? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to High Strangeness with your host, Steve Berg.
The video version. Well, hello, friendship buddies. Before we get to the episode with the wonderful Amanda Paulson, just a couple quick things I want to say. One is that I want to thank the Patreons for supporting the show. Thank you so much. You know who you are. I don't have the list of names right now, so I totally forgot that, but I'm going to read them off on the next show. So thank you so much. And if you want to be a Patreon, head on over and join up. We're doing some fun things. We got some live shows in January coming up, and we're also starting a research project this week that is going to be researching your local area, and then we do a show and tell once a month together. It's pretty good, fun, geeky stuff. And also, if you haven't yet, I would really appreciate a little review on Apple and Spotify or 5-star. I don't know how this stuff works. Everyone says it really helps. And I don't have a lot of reviews, and I sure would appreciate some. If you find the show good at all, I don't know. Maybe I don't want a bad review, but if you have to, do what you got to do. Also, I just want to mention that a couple weeks ago, the Fortean world lost an absolute giant, and that is Christopher O'Brien. And Christopher was really, oh man, he was really one of my favorite living Forteans. He had such a grounded approach to doing research, and his books on the San Luis Valley are absolute must-reads. It's actually a trilogy of Enter the Valley, The Mysterious Valley. And the books are so fantastic. They're just an exhaustive research over the course of about a decade in southern Colorado, and the stuff is really wild. Some really great cases. He also wrote a book that, if you're interested in the cattle mutilation phenomenon, called Stalking the Herd, which in my opinion is by far the best, most exhaustive book on the cattle mutilation phenomenon. And it is really, really fascinating. So I would recommend that. And I just, want to say that I'd like to dedicate this episode to Christopher O'Brien, because he was really kind of a hero to me. I had the good fortune to meet him about 10 years ago outside of a Methodist church where I saw him speaking, and he was smoking a cig and we were talking, and I was just so thrilled. And he took the time to sign my books, and he was just a really sweet guy. And so, Chris, if you're out there, buddy, I loved you, man. We never really knew each other too well, but I was such a big fan. So I hope you're doing well on the other side, my friend. Okay, folks. Well, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of High Strangeness. Now I give you this episode with the wonderful, the brilliant, the fantastic, and a new buddy, Amanda Paulson. Talk to you guys next time. Peace. Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to another episode of High Strangeness. Tonight, I'm super excited about this. I got my new buddy, Amanda Paulson, on. Amanda is a paranormal investigator, researcher, and medium based in the Pacific Northwest, or the PNW if you're cool. She began She didn't put that in. I added that, and I wish I could delete it, but I want you guys to know how dorky I am, so I'm going to leave it in there. Sorry. She began ghost hunting in 2008 with a team in Montana and started her blog, Pretty Effin' Spooky, in 2019. Amanda, how are you doing, friend?
I'm doing so good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I am super excited to have you. I have a couple questions right off the bat. I have an absolute obsession with Montana. I think it is maybe the most beautiful state in the lower 48.
I would agree. Yes.
Do you mind, where are you from exactly, Montana?
Yeah, I'm from Billings, Montana. So Billings is the biggest city in Montana, eastern Montana. So it's very flat, very dry out there, but it's very beautiful. I grew up going out to my family's cattle ranch, like very Montanan. I was very much living like the Yellowstone kind of life growing up. It was pretty cool. Yeah.
Oh my God, what a great state to grow up in. I actually have two of my really good friends. One lives in Missoula, the other one lives in Bozeman. And so not every year, but almost every year, every summer, I go there for like a week. And it is just every time I'm like, well, I guess I'll just move here. This place is amazing.
It is amazing. I lived in Missoula for a little bit, and then Billings is only 2 hours from Bozeman. So yeah, the whole state is amazing. But I've been in Spokane, Washington now for 16 years. So I'm like coming up on like half of my life is in Montana, and half of my life's in Washington State now.
Right. Well, I mean, not too shabby. Washington State. I mean, good God, the Pacific Northwest. How gorgeous.
I know, it's gorgeous and it's very weird, and there's lots of weird stuff out here. Yeah, I'm very.
Like, I mean,
Yeah.
well, I mean, like, I just, did what pulled you to Spokane? Is it Spokane or Spokane?
It's Spokane.
Spokane. Okay,
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know why I say cane sometimes.
That's okay. I don't care. I'm not from here, so it's okay.
You won't hold it against me.
Yeah. But Spokane, I just wanted to move to a bigger city. So I was in Billings, Montana, like clawing at the enclosure that I felt like I was stuck in Montana because I was young and I was like, get me out of here. I need to go to a big city. And the biggest city nearby that I could drive to was Spokane, and that's how I ended up here. So
that's great. And that's not too far. So like you can zoom back home if you want to see some people.
Yeah, it's an 8-hour drive. It's a long drive, but it's doable. So as long as I have family in Montana, I wanted to be kind of close by.
That's smart. I like that. That's a good move. And plus, just gorgeous. And like you said, weird as all get out. And if you're into this stuff, I mean, you could do a whole lot worse in Washington.
Oh, yeah. Washington's amazing. Spokane is on the east side of Washington, so not the weirdest side, although we do have a lot of Sasquatch sightings out here. It's very big out here. We have we have the Sasquatch people. I don't know if you've heard, like there's the psychic Sasquatch people are very big out here in Chewelah, Washington.
Hell yes.
And that's like a different kind of sect of Sasquatch where they are they don't have bodies. They're like ghostly kind of orbs floating in the forest, that kind of thing.
Yes,
so
please.
That's big out here. And then of course you have the Olympic Peninsula in Washington, which has so much like cryptid lore and UFOs and like everything out here.
Right. And I almost feel like I may be wrong about this. I'm pretty sure Washington still has the most sightings.
Yeah. I think so. On MUFON, right? It was like the highest sightings recorded in Washington State. As the last time I checked, we were still the highest. Yeah.
Yeah, and for like Bigfoot, like it's 1 or 2. So
yeah,
I mean,
Bigfoot too. Yeah, I mean it's a huge deal out here. So it's
the batting average is amazing for you. You got a lot cooking out there. It's amazing.
Yeah, I just walk out my door and I just run into them.
You said something that I can't help but take notice of, because when you said psychic Bigfoot people, I'm like, whoa. I like first off, that sounds great. I think they're my people. I like weird Bigfoot, and I like kind of the thought experiment that Bigfoot is more than a flesh and blood thing, because there is so much high strangeness around Bigfoot. But can you tell me a little bit about the psychic Bigfoot people?
Yeah, I'll tell you what I know. So there's a psychic Sasquatch festival that's out in Chewelah, Washington, which is like, I don't know, hour or two north towards the Canadian border of where I'm at. And there's lots of Sasquatch sightings out there, but the people who believe that the Sasquatch people are out there believe that these Sasquatch are like a different, like human beings, like a different species. Like there's not one Bigfoot, there's a species of Sasquatch people, and that they don't take form like the Sasquatch that we know, that they actually like present themselves as orbs in the forest, and they can communicate psychically with people out there. I'm trying not to laugh. I don't want to be rude.
No, but I love it. But it's funny. It's funny.
Yeah, there are people who like are very into it up there, and you go to that festival and you'll be shown like photos of the psychic Sasquatch orbs and lots of talk like the communication that people have had with the Sasquatch people. Very like nice people out there. It's very cool, but it's weird. It was like the first time I went was, I want to say 2021, and that was the first time I really got like exposed to that side of things, because before that I was like, Sasquatch is a creature. It's like a big furry man, and there's not many of them if there are more than one. But now after that, it's kind of opened my mind, and then I spent a lot of time researching out on the Olympic Peninsula, which has shown me a lot more too about what I believe Sasquatch is, which I'm still trying to figure out. But
right. Well, it could be both. It could be a flesh and blood thing. It could be totally immaterial, and sometimes it appears as a Bigfoot, but sometimes it's a ball of light. I'm into that idea just because there is undeniably, like, luckily enough, I've been able to speak with people who have witnessed Bigfoot. And not every time, certainly, but like a lot of times there are these weird symptoms that go along with it. Oh, and sometimes people even experience kind of like an Oz Factor, Jenny Randall style
Yes.
weirdness and orbs of light and mind speak and all that.
Yeah, people don't talk
That
about the Oz factor enough, honestly. I'm shocked that you mentioned that because I feel like that should be talked about more often. I think it's
hell
really
yes,
rad. Yeah.
I do too. I think Jenny Reynolds is a very underappreciated UFO researcher, or high strange researcher for that matter, in the United States, but her work is fantastic. I've been actually buying up some of her books because I didn't read her stuff growing up, but like I'm now just getting into it. I'm like, oh my God, what have I been missing?
Yeah,
Total
I have
legend.
a few of her books that I've found like thrifting over the years. I have way more like Carl Sagan than I do Jenny Randall's, but like I was actually hugely inspired by her work and the Oz Factor in particular in like some of my own paranormal research that I've done in the last
Oh
couple of
yeah.
years. Yeah,
Oh yeah.
she's great.
Well, I'm gonna just give a teaser. We are gonna get to that because I want to talk about the PET. I'm not even gonna say what it is yet. First of all, I'm very excited and enthused by this idea. I love new thought experiments, and this is unique. And we'll get to it, but I just want to kind of say, in preparation for this, I watched a ton of your videos, and they are so good. You're very charismatic, first off, but you are also very passionate and knowledgeable. But also, I feel like something that makes you unique that I have found, you are incredibly off the charts courageous. And I'm curious, is that something you have cultivated over the years, or did you just kind of have this courage towards the strange and unusual always?
I love that question. It's definitely something I think that I've cultivated mostly. I mean, I had to have had it inherently inside of me. Like I've been interested in this stuff for a long time, but my first paranormal experiences were when I was super, super young, and I was terrified of it all. I didn't really want to have anything to do with it. And I was also raised very religious. I was raised in the Baptist church,
Mhm.
and so there wasn't like any room for any of this stuff in the way that I was raised. And so I was very scared of it for a long time. When I turned 18, I joined a ghost hunting team, and I was like trying to sort of figure out what was going on. And then later on into my adulthood, through my 20s, I just started realizing that in order to find the answers I was seeking, I would have to just go it alone and just like go and do it. I couldn't, when I moved to Spokane, I couldn't find a new team. I just had a hard time like vibing with the right people. It's hard to
Right,
find people you vibe with
for
in
sure.
these communities, it can be difficult. And so, yeah, I guess I had to cultivate some courage. It's interesting. I don't look at myself as courageous, but I am flattered by it. And yeah, it's come out of necessity. I'm an extremely curious person. I'm very excited and passionate about what I do, and I'm not going to wait for anyone to go do it. I'm just going to do it.
I would clap, but I don't want to ruin the sound. But I'm gonna like do the raise the roof symbol because I love everything you just said. And hell, fucking yes. There's so many people. I'm just gonna use UFOs for example. And I'm not trying to be cynical or bitch here, but like, so many people are waiting for like, example, the government to tell them what UFOs are. I feel like that is such a waste of time. You're gonna be waiting forever. One, I don't think they know what it really represents either. We shouldn't just assume they are all powerful and know everything. But two, it is so much more fun to go after and figure this stuff out for yourself the best you can. I love it. So this is you have a very proactive approach to this stuff.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I that's just the way that's worked the best for me. And the way I feel like I've observed it work best for other people too, to just be proactive and like take a huge role in exploring phenomena. Like
Yes.
I just fully believe that we are like 50% of the mystery. Like that like, and so you just kind of got to dig in, you got to dive into it, and a lot of amazing, incredible stuff happens when you do that.
Oh my God. I love that you just said we're 50% of the mystery because yes, there is I mean, I don't know this for certain, but I feel the same way. I feel like there isn't a phenomena unless we're around to observe it, maybe. Like I don't know that for certain, but like I just feel it's what I like right now. I feel like there is a co-creative aspect to this stuff
Mhm.
that we are a necessary component for it to manifest.
Yes, I completely agree. Yeah, I'm very passionate about that specific line of thinking. I totally agree.
Oh boy. Well, you mentioned just a couple seconds ago that you had I did see this in one of your videos that you had an encounter when you were 8 years old.
Hmm.
Do you
Yes.
mind talking about that at all?
Yeah, I can talk about it. It wasn't anything too like wild or like in hindsight it wasn't too scary, but I was scared at the time. I moved to Montana. I actually was born in California. We only
Uh-huh.
lived there until I was like about 7 or 8. And when we moved to Montana, I was living with my mom and my grandma in this like little dinky duplex, and probably built in like the 60s or 70s. It really wasn't that old, and it wasn't that spooky. And I also wasn't predisposed to any paranormal media yet. Like I wasn't really watching scary TV yet. This duplex I had my first paranormal experience in. I was coloring on the floor of my bedroom, and I had this big like antique glass vase on top of a wooden dresser, and I'm coloring on the floor on my stomach, and I'm singing. I remember so vividly I was singing like the national anthem for some reason. I'm 8 and I'm like dramatic, and I was just, singing,
I love
um
it.
and I'm coloring, and then I hear the sound of glass moving on wood, and it was the glass vase moving itself from one end of the dresser to the other. And the context for this too was I had been seeing my dolls move in the middle of the night.
Oh,
I had been like staying up and kind of watching things and like thinking something was going on. And then this happened. I made my mom switch me rooms immediately.
yeah.
And it didn't really stop. I continued to experience things throughout my life and like through different places that I lived. So it wasn't really about the place, I don't think, in
Right.
hindsight. But yeah, that was my first paranormal experience. And then from then on, I kept experiencing weird stuff. I kind of tried to ignore it for a long time. Like I said, it really scared me. I didn't
Mhm.
immediately go, oh my God, I'm so into this and I want to explore it now. And I'm just like ready to go. Like it wasn't like that. I was just like, "Can you please stop? Like, I don't understand what's going on.
Right.
Am I going to hell?" Like
Yeah,
I
I'm
was
sure.
yeah, like I was very active in church, and so I was just super confused. But yeah, that's how it started for me. Was super young. And yeah, it never stopped. So
Yeah, and you kind of mentioned in the same video that it sort of followed you through every stage of your life. And
mhm.
so, I mean, like, obviously, you probably don't know this for certain, but do you feel like it's the same? I mean, it's kind of a weird question, I guess. It's like, is it the same entity? I mean, like, how I'm not. Do you have any sense that is the same sort of external force that is interacting with you, or do you think it's just like you're open to all things from the other side, and so different things are gonna, interact with you? Does that
Yeah,
make sense? That was kind of a weird way to
no,
phrase
that
it, but
that totally makes sense. I totally get what you're getting at. And I don't know for sure. Back then, like when, I had stuff happen at that house, I moved in with my grandma. That's another aspect of this story is I end up not living with my mom. She was in active addiction at the time, and I lived with my grandma, and then I had experiences at that house, and then I had experiences at the next house we were at. And
right,
I don't remember if I felt like it was the same spirit, but I'm inclined to say it wasn't. I think that maybe it was a case of like, and I don't think that I was like so gifted and special that I just walk into a place and I'm like this beacon of light to spirits. Like, I don't really necessarily believe that that's how it always is. I just think that like my openness and like, perhaps if we play with the idea of time and how time isn't linear too, like perhaps there was something about this other side element that understood that I would be more open to it one day, that I was kind of
right.
activating these spaces that I was in, and kind of like enlivening them by just my presence. So I think sometimes I kind of thought of it like maybe there was something dormant there, or like maybe in some cases there was an actual spirit, but maybe there was just dormant energy, and I just kind of activated it when I was around
Hmm.
because I carried this curiosity with me throughout life. So I don't know. That's like how I've looked at it, but I don't know for sure. Hell, like maybe there's some ghost that's been following me around since I was 8 in that duplex, and like that's wild if so. And if
Yeah, it's the
so,
same damn ghost.
yeah,
It won't leave you alone.
if so, I have a pretty good life, so they're like helping me out. So like you can
Right.
stay, that's fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. That's a great question and a cool thing to think about, but I have no idea.
Right, right, right. And like, so you had these experiences like from the time you were a child. and then when you were 18, you said you joined a ghost hunting group. So it must have been was this like something that like this is happening to me? I want to understand it better. Like, were you starting to like read books, and were you kind of like becoming the kid who was into ghosts and stuff? Like once it started
Yeah,
happening.
yeah, that is a little bit how it happened. I started kind of leaving the church in my own way at about 16 years old, 16, 17. Like I start kind of stepping away from it and starting to question it.
Right.
And that is when the curiosity of these paranormal experiences really kicked in, and I decided that I wanted to understand why it was happening to me. I was
Right.
also subject to I'm 34, so it was like early 2000s. By that point, by the time I'm like 17, there's like tons of like witchy cool shows out there. Like
Mm-hmm.
Buffy and X-Files have been out for a
Hell
while at
yes.
that point. Yeah, and so
I love Buffy. Huge
yes,
Buffy fan.
me too. And so like honestly, I think if I'm to be really like honest with myself, I think at 18 when I decided to join a ghost hunting team, I think I was just like really kind of full of myself and being like, okay, this is all about me obviously, like like I'm so like gifted and I can see these ghosts everywhere. Like I don't know, I was just like having a moment and I'm like I need to figure this out. I need to figure out my purpose with this. Quickly humbled, I joined a very awesome ghost hunting group that was like very serious, and this was 2008, so it was like the height of like original ghost hunters,
Right.
and like this want for people to find this like scientific proof of the afterlife. And so that was kind of the crowd I fell into, was humbled by it and learned a lot from them from that. But yes, I ultimately just wanted to like figure it out, why I was being called in that direction at that time.
Right. And so like, there's this like, when I first started going to like spooky places, I guess, that sounds dorky to say, but you know what I mean?
Mhm.
When I was younger, I would go to these places, but when I was being honest with myself, I would even like be out like in, at a graveyard where weird stuff happens in Lawrence, Kansas. I would honestly not want anything to happen. Like I would go out there because I was so curious, like, I have to see this place where the stuff happens. But I'm like, if you were to ask me, it's like, oh, I don't. Now I kind of do want it to happen, but like that took me a long time.
Yeah. I'm the same way, and actually like still kind of like that a bit. Like it's really subtle, but there'll be times when like if I was on an investigation and you turn a corner in a dark room and I was like kind of trying to avert my eyes because I like didn't really want to see what
Yeah,
could possibly be there. And I
right.
still catch myself doing that to this day. Sometimes if I'm really scared, I'm just like I don't want to see it
Yeah,
really. Like
yeah,
but I do want to see it.
right.
So I mean that fear is like so hard to overcome, and it's still something I like actively have to overcome to this day.
Yeah, it's really scary. I feel like if you have no fear of this stuff, I feel like I just don't believe you. Like I
Yeah,
can't see
or
how.
yeah, if they have no fear, then they really believe in like nothing, I feel like. Like I
Yeah,
feel like
yeah,
my fear is like it's not like debilitating. So like my fear is there because one, it's like trying to protect myself. It's like you shouldn't be in these like dark
right.
spaces by yourself, and then also because I like truly believe in a lot of the claims of these paranormal things happening. I'm like, it's possible that I could turn a corner and just be facing this ghoul, and like that freaks me out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm with you. Well, I kind of think like with fear and paranoia, it's like a little bit is good for you because it kind of keeps you safe. It keeps your wits about you, but you don't want to be overtaken with fear and paranoia because that is not a great state to be in, I don't
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah.
You have this wonderful, wonderful video, and folks, I'm gonna put a link to where you can get all her videos because they're really so great. But it's about egregores. And in it, you talk about intentionally haunting an object, which I love because it sounds kind of hyperstitional, which I'm really into. And, I'm in this hyperstition phase. But what is the process of haunting an object?
That's a great question. And also, I wanted to make a joke too when you're saying, my videos are so great. I appreciate it, but I promise I don't look like my webcam looks right
Yeah, yeah,
now. It's funny,
yeah,
but
yeah.
I look like
Amanda's using an old webcam because I asked her to get on Chrome because for some reason my software doesn't work well on Safari. So you were using like an old cam, but I think it looks good. Like you said, it's got a Blair Witchy vibe, kind of like a high 8 2002 era.
Thank you. Yeah, it's pretty cool. That's definitely what I'm going with. But
Yeah.
um yeah, so how do you intentionally haunt an object? Well, I have made this up entirely myself, so these rules are like very fluid
Right.
and it depends on who wants to do it and what works for you. But what's funny, I I took what my experience was with famous haunted locations like Waverly Hills and Lizzie
Hmm.
Borden, and how there was these discussions happening amongst paranormal investigators that we were all going to these famous locations and seeking out these ghosts there that didn't really exist at any point in time. We couldn't find any historical record, and
Right.
the conversation started rolling a few years ago about egregores and about how maybe we're contacting an egregore at Waverly Hills, like
Yeah.
in the form of a boy named Timmy or whatever.
Hmm.
And I took that concept and have been trying to apply it to objects or to basically anything, with just the idea that if I investigate something and start investigating anything with no predisposition for it being haunted, that continuing to ask it questions and kind of like roll it like a snowball almost
Right.
kind of lends my own energy to it and sort of, I don't know, like revs it up or something. I don't even
Right.
know how to explain it, but I just am obsessed with the idea that like we can and have been haunting places or objects intentionally or unintentionally. And I know that like the topic of egregores have been talked about for a long time.
Right.
I remember reading, and like I talked to Mark Stavish a while back about
Yeah.
his
Yeah.
work
He
with egregores.
he
Yeah, and
really was the one for me who kind of made it crystal clear like what the history and
what it is.
situation.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
he has some strong opinions on how the paranormal community plays into egregores. Like,
Right.
but he thinks it's a little dangerous for us to be messing with it. But I don't know, I just think it's fascinating, and I think it's just as spooky to think that like I don't know, it takes on a life of its own. I think, I don't know what video it was in particular. I want to say the video you were thinking of is about a toy, like a vintage toy that I had
Yep.
that I brought to a conference which with like a bunch of witches, and I had them intentionally haunt that. That was
Right.
something I've done before, and I truly believe that it worked. I had activity happen after I brought it home. I had some
Really.
weird synchronicities, and like it just kind of like maintained all of that energy that I asked them to kind of put into it. But I started that process by just like investigating it and kind of like making up a story for it as we were going. It is kind of the recipe for making an egregore, I suppose.
Well, I this is so fascinating, right? Because I have been obsessing about hyperstitions, and I'll remind the listeners what a hyperstition is. It's the opposite of a superstition, which is a fiction that remains fictional, but a hyperstition is a fiction that becomes real. And I I'm not saying like all this high strangeness necessarily emanates from stories or narratives we create, but I think there's something to this because like there are examples like the Philip. Have you heard of the Philip experiment?
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean that to me is a good example. They made up a person, a boy, gave him a backstory, gave him like really thorough backstory and like all these details of his life, and then they started like trying to with divination tools contact this spirit, and it was interacting with him as it was Philip.
Yeah. It's fascinating. And I know
Yeah,
in more modern day times, like there have been, I know, I think John Tenney or like the New Kirks or whoever, like have done like experiments like that too in more recent times. But yeah, I think it's interesting, like that intentional haunting or intentional creation, and then also when it's unintentional too is so fascinating when
right,
people accidentally um haunt places just by like, I don't know, like perpetuating a story over time. And then
right,
like cross culturally too, I feel like the hyperstition is very much possible that these stories have been told over time. And while maybe they originated from people, like early people's just like observing weather phenomena and stuff, like, there was probably like a normal reason for some things. But I think over time, it kind of creates a life of its own and can exist later on.
it does feel that way because even with like hoaxes, known hoaxes, what will happen, and there's a wonderful book being written by Josh Cutchin that kind of touches on some of this stuff. But what happens is, not all the time, but sometimes there are cases where, let's say, somebody hosts a Bigfoot sighting. Well, in that area, the next 5 years, people will see Bigfoot or a UFO sighting. A lot of, and the list goes on and on. And definitely with haunted places. I mean, like a lot of, I'm not sure what like the history, but like there are haunted places where I'm sure someone made up a narrative. It's totally, and then people go and actually experience stuff, but they experience the narrative and storyline that was created.
Yeah, I see that a lot, honestly. And I feel like I can say that without like I don't know, ruining anything for people, because I do think that it is genuinely just as spooky and interesting, even if it was created.
Totally.
Versus it being related to some tragedy or some like actual human death. And then also it makes me think too of like something I love to play with is like my audience on social media and how much power there really is behind how many eyes are on the content that I'm creating. And I try to utilize that to like create to the best of my ability and as safely as I can. I try to create situations like that. Like I've investigated objects that I have on camera before with no known knowledge as to if it's haunted or what the history to it is. But sometimes I just enjoy the act of investigating, showing it to an audience and having them perceive it in a certain way and kind of give it their own storyline or
Right.
whatever. And then
Right.
now like I have people who will be like, oh my God, is that like the spirit of George or whatever that you talked to that one time? I'm like, maybe, like you probably created it. And now there's
Right.
yeah. And I just think it's so cool and spooky and weird and magical. Like I just wish more people would be more people in the paranormal community, I wish would be more down with the idea. But I there's just so much attachment to like the traditional haunting and to
Right.
the idea of like getting to move a spirit on. Like I'm just not as interested by that. I like this stuff more.
Right. Well, I hear you. It's like I feel like, for myself, I don't have a fixed belief system in any of this stuff. I feel like there is definitely something to it, but like I don't know what it is. And like every couple of years I change my mind. But like I guess for me, like, kind of like the extraterrestrial hypothesis, I feel like the dead person hypothesis, DPH, that could be the case. But like that's one of many options we have in terms of like defining what this stuff is.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you just brought up the dead person hypothesis. I haven't talked about that in like years. It's just like kind of like this is the language and like the kind of topics that come up in conversations about high strangeness, which I
Mm-hmm.
love. But it's
Yeah.
like you don't I'm still trying to bridge the gaps with like the traditional paranormal community where I can, but
Right.
I'm in Washington State. High strangeness and these topics is like literally my whole thing, you know?
Right. Right. Well, how? I mean, like I'm always amazed when there's people who are just like, I'm just into Bigfoot. That's it. I'm like, really? But the other stuff isn't at least a little interesting to you. But it is kind of like because you are like, uh, you know, is influencer the right word? Pardon my, but like you're a big deal like on social media and like you have a pretty damn big fan base. So like, I'm really happy that someone with the popularity you have is talking about these kind of like, I guess, more esoteric, heady ideas with this stuff because we don't know. And these thought experiments, I feel like are really important, and if we could share, like if the ghost community would share stuff with the UFO community, UFO community would share stuff with the Bigfoot community, we might really start finding some patterns and really start asking better questions about all this stuff.
Yeah, I totally agree. This is also kind of the topic where I always end up thinking too about like the trickster archetype and the
Yeah.
idea that the trickster is present in these communities always when we start arguing with each other. Those three communities, the UFO, the Bigfoot, and the ghost communities. I feel like the trickster comes in and is like, you're not going to get along because or else you would find the answers. Like you're too close to the
Right.
answer. We're gonna mix it up and you can't quite get there. Because I feel like I'm always like almost there. And there's other like very influential people who are also doing this. I'm by no means the only one or like, but and I do have to kind of go about it in like not in a sneaky way, but like I make content that's very like ghost hunter forward, and that is
Right.
like my background too, and I love ghost hunting,
Hell yeah.
and that's totally fine. But I try to like present things out there with my content, uh and then start a conversation, and then it's in those conversations that I try to go, well, have you considered the interconnectedness of all phenomena, and like what if it's this or what if it's that, and that's what like really brings me fulfillment and like purpose with my online following. I'm very grateful for what I have, but yeah.
Yeah, well, you worked hard for it, and you have a big following for a reason, because your shit is good, man. Like
Thank you.
it is. The videos are just good. Good is good. So, you had one, and this isn't actually directly. I mean, it could be perceived as paranormal, but not exactly. But I loved it, and I had never like thought about this, but it was a video about property gardens, which I had never heard. And immediately, my first thought was like, this would be a great TV show.
Yeah.
About property guardians,
Yes.
just like the boredom, they're guarding a big like asylum or something like that. But like, what? How did you find out about this? And can you explain to the listeners what a property guardian is?
Yeah, I'll try my best. I did find out about this online, like from content that I found on TikTok, but I'm immediately fascinated by the idea that there are these people who live in like typically abandoned or like buildings that are in between purposes,
Right.
that aren't typically lived in. So like asylums or old jails or old whatever, hospitals, and people live in them, and like pay like a reduced rent, in order to guard the place and like be people who are like occupying the space so that like people don't come in and destroy it.
Sure.
And so that's like a very loose definition of property guardians. And I think it's fascinating because a lot of the people I found that were doing this were like very regular people and like just people trying to find cheaper rent, and I immediately saw it and was like, that has got to be the most liminal place I've ever heard of.
Yeah.
And we need to be investigating this like immediately. I wish I could. I don't have access to any property guardianship. I wish I did. Maybe I'll put it out there in the universe and somebody will come forward. But like, I just think that concept where you're literally living in the in between, and in this structure, I just feel like that could be such a good spot to connect with the other side. I just feel like it's so liminal and so bizarre and weird that like it must slip you into like some crack or touch point, where the other side is easier to connect with. I just love the idea of it.
I do too. And you bring up liminality, and liminality, while it's often associated with spaces or locations, it's also emotional. It's like sometimes when you're getting divorced or you're moving across the country, like you can be emotionally liminal too. And oftentimes, George P. Hansen would talk about that is when people have these, not all the time, but can have these experiences.
Yeah.
But tell us what, like, if I don't know how you can put this into words, maybe, but like, what is it about liminality that you find so attractive with high strangeness and the paranormal?
Well, so like you said, like the concept of liminality is much bigger than like what it's been deduced to recently in popular media, which it's not just places. Like you said, it's also states of our life, and like it's gets its start in anthropology with rites of passage, and like the liminality is the state that you find yourself in when you're right between who you were. So maybe you were a boy and now you're becoming a man through some rite of passage, and like you're just betwixt in the middle of that. And I think that when I started thinking about like how important this was and to high strangeness and like how much it could be connected, I was thinking about the fact that when you like look at liminality too broad, you start looking at our entire life as being liminal.
Right.
And then,
Right.
just between birth and death. But then really when you look at the traditional ghost, that is also a liminal state. If you want to, like, depending on your personal spiritual belief or religious belief, you could be in a spot between living in like heaven or hell or whatever's next, that cosmic river of consciousness or whatever. But it just, the act of being a ghost to me just like was inherently liminal.
Yeah.
And also, liminality creates like this really visceral kind of odd feeling within ourselves that I know we've all felt before. If you're in a liminal place in your life, or like in a liminal space, like an actual building or something, it just feels like so viscerally bizarre. And
Yeah.
I just feel like there's something to that. It's uncommon. We don't feel like that often. And we don't experience paranormal phenomena all that often. And so the
Right.
two must be somewhat related. And that's just like the surface level of what I think about liminality. I just love it. And I love, like, what's funny too though is like I kind of hate it though. I hate being in a liminal place in my life. Like right now, between the election and inauguration, extremely
Yeah.
liminal.
Totally.
We are like in this very uncomfortable space where we
Yeah.
don't yet know. I mean, we kind of know what's coming, but like we
Yeah.
don't. We're just like floating in this void, and so it's like on one hand, I don't love being in a liminal place for too long, but I would do it in order to explore the potential for contacting phenomena through
Right.
liminality.
Right. I mean, like, do you know of anyone, or have you ever experienced, like, actually, like, actively seeking out a liminal location, or I guess even going further, putting yourself, or when you are in a liminal state, trying to investigate? And have you had any, like, more significant results?
Yes, I have. I have utilized like liminal times in my life a lot to investigate, and the way that I've done that, because it's not about the place that you're in necessarily. In that case, you're paying attention to yourself being a liminal being. And so I've utilized it to investigate any phenomena on the other
Hmm.
side. Specifically, I typically try to reach like a specific person. Like
Right.
I've tried to investigate. I did a documentary out on the peninsula about Lake Crescent and the Lady of the Lake out there, and I had to
Oh,
contact the Lady of the
cool.
Lake. Yeah,
Is that out?
that comes out next month. It comes out on December 17th,
Oh,
actually.
hell yeah. Well,
Ve-
let's talk about that at some point, please. Please,
Yes,
please.
absolutely. But with that, I in that project, it took like 3 years to film it, or like to be totally done. It took a long time. Passion project,
Hmm.
and so I got put in this position where I needed to contact this like very specific person, this very specific ghost. And I started playing with paying attention to these liminal places that I was in, or when I felt like I was a liminal being myself, and trying to contact her. So essentially mediumship. Like at that point, you're not really ghost hunting. You're kind of like trying to tap in another way.
Right.
But I found it to be incredibly successful. And liminality has, in my opinion, been the most successful um, thing like that. But nostalgia is also incredibly successful with utilizing that to connect to the other side.
Oh yeah, I want to talk about that because you had two videos, part 1 and 2, about nostalgia. And I thought, again, I had not heard these ideas phrased the way you did, and so like I just want to reiterate, like, I watching your videos, there was like a handful of ideas. I'm like, huh, I never thought about that, and that is my favorite thing in the world. And I feel like that is hard to, like. I'm an old head. I've been studying this stuff for a long time, and like, I mean, I'm telling you, I'm just so impressed. Your videos are very, very good. I wanted to bring up another one. I'm sorry, I'm going to talk about a lot of your videos because I'm excited about them.
Yeah.
But there was one about Bigfoot potentially being a ghost.
Yes.
Would you mind talking about that a little bit?
Yeah. So, gosh, um, a lot of these ideas have come about in my last like 5 years of investigating, because that's when I really started doing a lot of stuff alone. But I know that other researchers have talked about this theory of Bigfoot being a ghost, but my first experience with it myself was out in a cemetery in the Idaho Panhandle. And I've shared about this cemetery online before a few times, and every time I go out there, I have a weird experience. But a couple of years ago, I was out there, and there's no one in this cemetery, and it kind of goes up this hill into the forest, and it's inside of this canyon where there's a huge mine at the end of the canyon that's abandoned now.
This
And so
sounds terrifying.
yeah, the area is extremely weird, and like it's also terrifying, like people wise too. I mean, they're just like,
Yeah.
get out of my canyon, and like hear you on that. Like, I shouldn't be in your canyon in the first place.
Yeah.
But and there's a cemetery though. It's very beautiful, huge, and this old part of it goes up into the forest. And then there's like this line where it's just the cemetery ends, and then it's just forest up this steep hill, and there's no fence or anything. It's just forest. And the years ago when I was there, I was investigating this specific area. I felt called to this specific headstone, and I don't normally investigate cemeteries, but I just felt called to here. And I go up to this headstone, and I'm starting to get my equipment out and trying to kind of feel out the area. And I hear just inside of the tree line the loudest like crunching of twigs and stuff, like huge branches breaking right in front of me. And my first thought was like moose, which is very possible, or potentially bear. But I was really thinking moose because there are moose out there. And I was like, shit, there's a moose here. Like, I'm in danger. And I kind of stop and I look, and I'm like looking at the direct source of the sound, but I'm seeing nothing. And I'm like so confused. And I kind of see a little bit of trees rustling, but I'm just seeing absolutely nothing. And so I kind of waited out, and then I hear it again, and I hear what sounds like somebody like getting out of the forest, like an ant, and coming out. And so I run away, and I run back to my car, and I like get ready to leave. But I realized at that time, I was like, whatever I just saw had the characteristics of an animal, but also was invisible? Question mark. Like, I don't know. I just had no clue what I had just experienced, and it was like very beyond at the time, beyond what my set of beliefs allowed for. Like, that was like really kind of blowing my mind a little bit, and I'm like, God, what could that be? And I ended up leaving an offering. I had a compass on me, and I ended up leaving that at like the gate of the cemetery, because I kind of started playing with this idea too. I was like, okay, well, maybe it's kind of like a psychic Sasquatch thing or something, you know, like a Sasquatch ghost. And I'm like, but maybe he's like the guardian of the cemetery. Like, I don't know. I was just writing stories in my head about it. And I'm like, okay, so I leave an offering. And then I actually was just back at that cemetery not that long ago, like a couple months ago. And I was filming something for like some content, like a paid partnership. And so I was working, like I was not trying to investigate. I had a tripod up. I'm like trying to film me like exploring this like little tree line. And I start getting like chestnuts or something, like rocks and nuts thrown at me.
Shut
like,
up.
You're kidding me. And that is just so synonymous with like Sasquatch stuff, you know, between like the twigs breaking and the wood sounds, and then getting stuff thrown at me, which some people were like, it's a squirrel. But I'm like,
they don't throw things at you.
Apparently they do. So I mean,
I don't know about that.
I don't know. Yeah, it didn't seem likely because it was big, and I caught the sound on camera. When I noticed it, I like grabbed my camera, and I kind of am confused and like run away. But you can hear the sound of like these rocks just, or nuts, I don't know, being thrown and like hitting the ground. And anyway, that cemetery has made me question for myself personally the idea of like Bigfoot being a ghost, like, or is there some kind of like primordial animal or being or something that is able to persist in this like, you know, form or whatever. I don't know exactly.
well, I mean, you do. I mean, like with Bigfoot reports, plenty of times you hear about, you know, that even flesh and blood Bigfoot people will say like, well, yeah, they have cloaking abilities. When it's funny when they say that, I'm like, well, that isn't that supernatural, but you know, that's beside the point. But also the throwing of objects. I mean, this sounds like poltergeist activity.
Yeah, I would agree.
You know, the writer, researcher, and a personal friend of mine, Joshua Cutchin, calls it. He kind of has a pet name for this Bigfoot activity. He calls it the Wildergeist.
Ooh.
You know, which is like wilderness poltergeist phenomenon. And like, I mean, I'll be damned, you hear about this stuff though associated with Bigfoot quite often, you know, like it's definitely not like a rule that you always experience like, you know, other high strangeness, but like, man,
I know
the orbs of light, things being thrown, the cracking of like you know, like branches, and then, you know, big branches falling from tree, but there's nothing up there. Like,
yes, exactly. And I was staring directly at the source. Like you know, when you know, like I was like, I'm perceiving something I no one's going to believe me about.
Right.
But also like, I mean, really, even before that, the first time I investigated on the Olympic Peninsula, we were out in the forest outside of Lake Crescent, which is near it's the Olympic National Forest. And that too was like the first time I ever heard wood knocking, which I never believed personally until I experienced it myself. And I was with some camera crew, and they were like, "Do you hear that?" And it was the middle of the winter, and I was like, "Yes, I don't know what's going on." And that forest in particular always made me feel like such a guest. Like I felt like I was being like perceived by something that I
Right.
didn't understand, and like they were like, "You get to be here for a short period of time and then you got to go." Like
Right.
it was so interesting out there. So yeah, that time on the Olympic Peninsula and then also that Idaho cemetery were just two instances that really like expanded my mind on what Sasquatch could be potentially.
And when you were at this Idaho cemetery, you were by yourself?
Both times, yeah.
Good God. That's crazy.
I know.
Like,
Well, if I'm ever posting a story, I'm not by myself. I try not to out myself for being by myself. Sometimes I'm not by myself, like
right, right,
whatever.
right, right, right.
But
Sorry, I'm not. Yeah, I didn't mean to out you. Yeah.
no, that's
You know,
okay. I
I'm
mean,
just
yeah,
like it's scary. You know, like
yeah, yeah. I don't know. I
not to
maybe
you though.
I guess maybe I said I don't consider myself like courageous, but like maybe I don't have any self-preservation. I don't know. I just like
I think you're just courageous. Like it's okay. Like you know, to call yourself courageous because I mean you just literally are. Like I mean, I would like I'm not scared of the phenomena or whatever. I mean, I am. I have fear of it for sure. But like, it's more weirdos in like rural areas freak me out. I've just seen too many movies. Like I'm not scared like during the day in rural Nebraska, but at night I'm like, yo.
yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm way more cautious when it comes to like human beings that could be
Oh,
near, but I try to seek out places that like human beings are less likely.
right. That's
Yeah.
smart. That's smart. And it seems like you're doing okay so far, so that's good. I want to just here's a thought experiment for you because that video made me think like, oh my god, well, what if UFOs are like or the occupants of UFOs are ghosts, like ghosts from Venus? Like Venus was once a planet like Earth, maybe, and then they died years ago. Now we're just seeing the ghosts, and they're just driving around their like ghost vehicles.
Oh my god. That'd be
Uh,
incredible.
yeah,
It's
just
possible. I
yeah,
feel like yeah, I'm just really down with being like I don't know, and also maybe like I just really think anything's possible. I don't think I can believe in some of the stuff I do really believe in without being open to the possibility of all of the other stuff. And like,
sure,
yeah, I think that the term ghost should definitely have a broader definition, and that we should be able to. Same with haunting. Like,
mm-hmm,
I often like find myself looking up the actual dictionary like definition of haunting because I use it so freely and like I'm haunting an
right,
object. This is haunted. There's a haunting. And I'm like, that's not always necessarily what I mean, but it's like ghost and haunting are just the words that we have. But like, yeah, I think that like UFOs and cryptids and all of these things could have the potential to be a ghost, like to be
right,
invisible to the eye or to persist after they ceased to exist, like
right.
I don't know.
It's fun to think about, that's for sure.
Hmm.
you know, um, I another thing I noticed with your content is that you love to experiment. Like it's almost like a little science experiments you do in some of your videos. And I love the one, for instance, you were like uh haunting a Ouija board. And I thought it was funny too because you said the Ouija board smelled like Fruit Loops.
Oh yeah.
But how do you come up with these experiments? I think it's so good because like you're trying so much different stuff. Like in like I feel like there's the traditional way to use a Ouija board, but you're actually investigating the tool of divination, which I'm like, damn, I've never seen anyone do that. I think it's great.
Yeah, I feel like any equipment could. I guess if we're going to assume that an object can be haunted, then technically any physical object could be haunted. And this Ouija board that I found at an antique store in town, it had the smell of Fruit Loops, which somebody told me later. Fruit Loops smells like some other kind of smell, like an oil I can't remember what it
Mm-hmm.
was. But I started kind of thinking, I was like, actually, I don't think it has a smell. Like it was, I realized when I made that observation about it that I got an impression of a smell. Like, and I was like, whoa, that's confusing. It's not actually emanating a smell. I'm picking up an impression from it. And then I was like, oh, there's some kind of something reverberating off of this. There's some energy here. And maybe it's from the person who last used it. Maybe it's from a spirit that had come through it. Like, I don't know, but yeah, that stuff really interests me. And that's truly like how the experiments that I do are started, are just like, it's just having like this never ending, again, curiosity about things. And like, I don't know, I guess I was just born like in this way that I like think in multiple layers about things. So I'm just like, well,
Right.
if it's this, then it's this, and then it's this, and like I just will go on forever. But I appreciate that that you like the experiments in content. That has been a challenge to try to like portray it in that way, because short form
Right.
video is a very interesting medium to work with. Like, you're working with, at one point before they updated, you're working with minute and a half long videos, and
Oh
like,
my God.
and that's super hard to convey this like
Yeah.
complex line of thinking that I'm saying, like, so then, and then also that's not what performs well too. 'Cause there's this other conversation, which is like, I am a content creator, like I know how to make content that performs well and gets my voice out there and gets this stuff seen and heard, but I have to deduce it down to this like really simple concept. Like, I am ghost hunting a Ouija board, and
Yeah.
that is that. And then I get a lot of comments that say, whatever, you're an idiot, or you're messing with something you don't understand, all of this stuff, and they don't understand like the process of thinking that led there. But that's okay, because I
Right.
want to generate that conversation,
Right.
and that's the point. I have had to gain a thick skin for that, but like, I've been
Yeah,
told a lot
well,
of stuff.
I mean, I remember when I first started doing stuff on like TV and stuff, and I started reading comments, and like, some are nice, and you're like, oh, well, that's so nice. Oh, you think I'm funny. And then you start reading, it's like, I hate this guy. He ruined the entire show. And I'm like, oh no. Like, and then people are like, dude, don't read those. I was like, oh, okay, yeah. But it is, if from your angle, it's like, well, you're trying to start a conversation. So I'm sure engaging with your audience is part of the deal, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I'm engaging with them in comments, and I'm also really actively engaging with them in messages and privately. And like, I'm just trying to foster a community of like understanding and openness, because I didn't love the way that I was seeing the paranormal community interact prior
Mm-hmm.
to my time online, throughout the 2010s and stuff. And even still now today, you're always going to have people you don't agree with
Sure.
in communities. But like, I was just like, I really want to create a space where somebody can come to me and be like, I think I saw the ghost of Sasquatch guarding the cemetery, and like, and that we can just have a normal conversation about it and be like, yeah, this is the thing that could maybe happen, while also understanding that I'm a good person to be in this position, because I can also rationalize it, and I also have discernment that I've garnered through,
Yes.
deconstructing my religious beliefs and stuff. Like, I just
Right.
have like a long lifetime of figuring shit out, and I just want to like take other people on that journey with me in a safe space.
Right. And I think you are achieving that at the next level, because another wonderful attribute is like, I never one of your videos where you're like, this is what it is and this is what it represents. And you do see a surprisingly large number of people, and all these UFOs and all these, ghosts, all these communities kind of claim they have the answer.
Yeah.
And even like in the TV shows, or like the premise of any like documentaries, like, we're going to go seek the answer and we're going to find it. I'm like, no, you won't.
Yeah, I
But the
know.
mystery, but the act of like adventuring to try to interact is enough. You don't need to claim to have an answer to anything, and you don't. And I love it. And you have a good spirit. It's an adventurous spirit, because I do think like all the experiments you're doing, there's a multitude of things that set you apart, but that really sets you apart for me. Like, I'm just like, you are like trying to almost invite this stuff into your home so you can study it.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Sure,
to
yeah.
distill it down, like,
Yeah. Well, and I also, that kind of comes from like not always having a ton of money. I can't spend the money to like go on an investigation or like
right.
travel across the world all the time. Like, I do my best, but like ultimately I have all of the power and control right here. Like, I can explore these realms myself, and like, I'm just trying to find new and different ways and like more efficient ways to do that. And like, ultimately, because I like enjoy it, but I also think that uh understanding the phenomena more can help bring us, like, as living people and as a society, can help elevate us, and like,
Right.
you know, we can maybe, I don't know, one day be kinder to each other. That'd be
Yeah.
sick. But like, yeah,
Wouldn't that be great? Maybe we can form that utopia some of us are always hoping for.
where everyone believes in ghosts and aliens. Yeah, I don't know. I'm getting ahead of myself, but yeah, yeah. I just love it. I love experimenting, and I'm glad other people enjoy it too, for the most part.
Yeah, well, I think you have a knack, and maybe I don't know if this is intentional, but you demystify a lot of these things. And like you said, like you don't have to buy a plane to go to Waverly Hills. And, you know, if you can, great. But like you can do this stuff at your own home, at a little wildlife management area around where you live. Like I'm a real big believer in like like everyone, you know, like what do we research? I think a lot of people research the same things, but like if you just take the little 100-mile radius around where you live, you will find all kinds of weird things that
Yeah.
you can investigate, research, and document. And I think if all of us were doing that and then shared the notes, wouldn't that be cool?
Yes, I agree. That reminds me of the work that the Liminal Earth guys are doing. Have you heard? Yes,
I do. Yeah.
they're super big on like exploring their own area, and like they're also very innovative with their approach too. So there's like a lot of cool people out there doing cool shit, and I'm happy to be in a position where I have some more of an audience in front of me, where I can really start hopefully bringing these ideas to a new group of people who are maybe coming to me to look for ghost hunting, and instead find this like new line of thinking. That would be my ultimate goal with all of it.
You're headed that way. You're heading that way. I must bring up the paranormal emotive touch point, PET, for short. So can we, I mean, like, I guess I could like ask certain, or do you want to just kind of give like, and I know it's probably because it's complex, but the way you wrote about it, you had a little link that I read. It was like a 1-page,
Yeah.
really succinct, and really gives you a good view into your idea. But can you kind of generally speak about it, and then maybe I can ask a couple of questions within that?
Yeah, absolutely. I also give a lecture where I talk about it. So I have gotten
Do you really?
Yes, I have gotten it dialed down a little bit to it's been a journey though, because I wrote it a couple years ago, and it was like this big thing to try to talk about, but I think I have it down now.
Yeah.
But the paranormal emotive touch point theorizes that there are these touch points or soft spots throughout the world where the veil is thinner and the other side is easier to communicate with. However, this is not connected to like traditional hauntings or even to holidays like Halloween or events like solstices where the veil is thinner. This is actually connected to our emotions. A paranormal emotive touch point can be identified by it showing us odd emotions, is what I call it. Odd emotions are things like we were talking about, liminality, nostalgia, and also odd occurrences like synchronicity or deja vu. And in writing this theory and also experiencing it as well, I realized that there was these times, moments and times in random places where I was feeling maybe a bout of nostalgia, or I was having deja vu, or I was experiencing a synchronicity storm. And I started experimenting with stopping in that moment and trying to investigate either the feeling itself or trying to investigate, I don't know, the spirit of my grandpa or
Right.
Mothman, whatever I wanted to try to contact. And I started having incredible success with contacting the other side if I was paying attention to the emotions that I was feeling, specifically these more anomalous, uncommon emotions like liminality and nostalgia. And so now the paranormal emotive touch point, as I've written it, are these actual touch points is what I like to call them, but they're these places throughout the world, and they don't even have to be like a building or a traditionally haunted place. It's just places or moments in time where the veil is thinner and we get tipped off to it by feeling deja vu or whatever. And if you stop in that moment and try to connect with the other side, I think that you're going to have more efficacy in it. I think you're going to have more success than maybe you would have had you not paid attention to your emotions and kind of let your emotions guide the investigation. And the theory, as I've written it, it kind of gets deeper into it. And I theorize that like we can also create these touch points and that maybe they can persist too, which is something I'm still kind of trying to figure out how to articulate. But I do think that maybe when we feel like, say, Well, for instance, I had a showing of my film, The Lady of the Lake, last year in a small old theater here in town, and I had a bunch of people there. And when we watched it, a bunch of people had a lot of synchronicities happen while watching the movie, and they were like, "Wow, this is so crazy! You mentioned this. I was just talking about this, whatever." And I had a couple people tell me that, and so I started suspecting that maybe that theater, I created one of these paranormal emotive touch points on accident by all of us
Amazing.
experiencing this collective synchronicity. And that maybe if I were to go back to that theater, I didn't get to test this, but if I were to go back to that theater just a little bit afterwards, I could investigate there and have, more activity, or have an easier time connecting with the other side. Like maybe it was haunted by our emotions. Ultimately, this theory I wrote just to try to communicate to people that we need to pay attention to our emotions. And again, like I said in the beginning, like the 50-50 exchange there of how important it is with the living interacting with the paranormal. And the paranormal emotive touch point, in my opinion, has proven to show that, like, sometimes we're not hunting the ghosts, sometimes the ghosts are hunting us, and sometimes the other side is calling out, and there's two sides of it, and we need to pay attention to it.
Oh, bravo. I love this line of thinking. Like, first off, I mean, like, the notion of nostalgia, I think, is super interesting because it is a powerful emotion. And like, I even read somewhere like smell is such a powerful sense connected to nostalgia as well.
Mm-hmm.
But is there like an instance that you feel like you've been nostalgic for, like, that randomly came on and you kind of felt this need to investigate? Like, I'm just so fascinated with the nostalgia angle.
Yeah,
I've
that's funny
never
you
heard
say
that.
that's funny you say that, because more and more lately I've been more called to the nostalgia element. Whereas initially, when I wrote this theory a couple years ago, when I started writing it, I was really hyper focused on liminality. It was kind of like a buzzword. I was like super, super interested in it.
It's great, yeah.
Yeah, and it's still super cool. But lately, I've been more called to digging into nostalgia because I just feel like it's kind of slipping by and people aren't really paying attention to it. And especially like when you consume a lot online, like I do, a lot of TikTok,
Mm-hmm.
and you see these people like making these like video slideshows of nostalgic, like what their classroom used to look like in elementary school or whatever. People are like wanting like nostalgia. They're like
Yeah.
they have this desire to like create it. And with that said, I have done an experiment before. This is kind of an answer to your question, but I did an experiment once where I used to play this game called fourth grade. What was it called? Jumpstart Fourth Grade. It was like a computer PC game that I played in like the fourth grade. And it was like a haunted house one. I loved it. And I found like an entire playthrough of it on YouTube. And I watched it. I started watching it, I was like, oh shit, I can't believe this is on here.
Yeah.
I started watching it. I started feeling this like deep, visceral nostalgia. Like I was just like, oh my God, my chest, like, I was like, oh, I miss being a kid. It just like brought me right back. So I did this experiment where I played that I have a CRTV too. Like I have other shit here. And I played that while I was investigating. So I like would
Wow.
watch it and then investigate like the haunted objects that I have here. And I felt like it I hate using this like term, but like raised the vibrations, but like it really felt like it, like the air got thick with energy. And like, if you've been investigating a lot, the feeling of like when things change, that it'll be not active in a room on an investigation, and then all of a sudden everyone feels kind of like, ooh, something just came in the room. That's how
Mm-hmm.
it felt when I was like basically creating this nostalgia for myself. And yeah, so I've had a lot of successful instances like that. I would love to be able to do this on a larger scale. That's my next goal, is to try to have multiple people involved. But that's kind of hard because this really kind of does end up being more of a very personal thing, because you're paying attention to your own emotions, and
Right.
you can't speak for like other people. You're like, don't you feel nostalgic? You'd have to basically create nostalgia for a small group of people with the same thing somehow. Or maybe each
Right.
person was watching a different thing or smelling a different thing or doing something different, but you'd have to like do it at the same time and then basically create a paranormal emotive touch point and then investigate. There's a lot of different directions you could go with it.
It really it gets me thinking though, because like it makes me want to grab like a Curious George book, which I loved as a kid, and like sit in a forest or like wildlife management area and sit down and read the book. And go to a place obviously where there are things reported or not, but and sit and read the book and try to make nostalgia happen, which I think it would. I mean, like when I read Curious George, it reminds me of being a child, my grandma, blah blah blah,
Yeah.
sad and happy stuff. But that is such an interesting idea because heightened, it does seem, and I'm not saying it is, but it does seem like when you are in a heightened emotional state, these things are a little easier to perceive.
Yes. Yeah. I completely agree. And that's talked about a lot with heightened emotional like feelings of sadness or grief. Grief is talked about a lot, and like the experiences that we can have in the wake of grief, um and fear, and like I don't know, we see it a lot with other things, but yeah, nostalgia, I'm like, nostalgia is weird. It's inherently connected to the past. It just
Right.
kind of contextually makes sense that we would like put ourselves into the past in our mind, and that maybe it would connect us to that like different stream of consciousness or whatever, because
Right.
we don't know how this phenomena is really happening, like, so it's
Right.
like, but if we can put ourselves in their shoes a little bit more, like by putting ourselves in this weird feeling.
It's interesting with nostalgia too, because while it is kind of like this whimsical moment when you feel it, like I had nostalgia. This sounds so dumb. Okay. If you'll please, I'm an idiot though. This summer, I had one of my old college buddies in town and he was staying overnight with me and we were, drinking beers and doing all that stuff, having fun. And at the end of the night, I got some Tombstone pizzas, which are like cheap frozen pizzas. If people
Yeah.
don't know what they are. They're not good at all. But we would eat them in college because we were poor and they were very cheap. But I put one of those in and we both took a bite. And it was not because we didn't like look back like, oh, those were so good. We knew they were horrible at the time. But we both took a bite of it and like we're like, oh my God, this like tastes like college.
Yeah.
And we had this like really wonderful sense of emotion, like shared a high five, but like like nostalgia doesn't necessarily have to be like a positive thing either. And sometimes you're nostalgic about things that you're surprised about.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes nostalgia will hit you out of nowhere, which are like the smell does that.
Yeah.
And taste, like where you'll be like, oh my God, like I smelled a woman the other day, and it brought me back. Or you know what, actually just today I had nostalgia because we drove by a house that was clearly burning a fire in their fireplace, and the smell of it was very specific, and it reminded me of my aunt and uncle's house, and it was like all of a sudden I was back in this place, and that in that case was like a neutral feeling, like I'm like, it wasn't really a happy memory, or it was just like nostalgia.
Right.
I don't know. Like,
Right.
yeah.
I think it's kind of like with the word haunting, like words and language are so loaded because I feel like when you think of the word haunting, at least most normies would probably say that they have it has a negative connotation,
Hmm.
like demons and like The Exorcist. And same with nostalgia. I think there's this tendency for us to feel like, oh, well, I'm nostalgic for that, oh, the bygone days, but like it's not always. Literally, the word's not defined by it being positive.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
It can
yeah,
be neutral too.
the word's not defined by a positive longing for the past. It's
Right.
just like, yeah, but yeah, I love nostalgia in
Mm-hmm.
general. I think it's interesting. But nostalgia for me, sometimes I struggle with um experiencing it. Like it really does create like a feeling in my chest sometimes, like, and I don't know what that is. Like that's what's driving me. That's my driving force for like
Right.
exploring this as paranormal phenomenon, is that I don't know what that feeling is. I'm like, why am I feeling that? And like
Right.
maybe, yeah, maybe there's something otherworldly about it. Maybe there's something not normal, paranormal.
Well, it's interesting because like the way you just kind of like grab your chest and like it's like nostalgia can have physiological create physiological changes within a person. You can have more adrenaline or like, and so that just by itself is could be chemically inducing us to help us experience this stuff. I mean, like, I have to comment you. I think this idea is very exciting. This is one of the most exciting new ideas I've heard in a long time, and I'm so excited to see where you take this. Like, I feel like there might be a book here, FYI. Just saying, like,
Yeah.
but do you have an online lecture where people could watch you talk about this?
Not online yet. I have so I gave the lecture at 3 events this year, and then I'm doing Strange Escapes with Amy Bruni in
Oh,
February in
nice.
Tombstone, and I will be giving it there, and then after that I'm gonna put it online. But I am kind
Great.
of and I think I can talk freely about this here without supposing that I have like a big ego or anything. But like I do recognize that I'm onto something with this. Like I feel very
Yeah.
passionately about it, and I think it could only help to get the idea out there more, because I feel like the more I talk about it, the more people hear about it, the more they can relate to it, and it can become more fine-tuned and it can be utilized. And so I am kind of holding on to some of it for, yes, a book possibly.
Good.
And there are a lot of ideas I have, but mostly all just stemming from the want to like get this idea out there. I really appreciate you recognizing it for what it is, because I'm just like, I really think I'm onto something here.
Yeah, I do
And
too.
yeah, and I'm just like very passionate about it, and also too, like, not to get like too deep or even self-deprecating, but I'm not like super highly educated. I didn't finish college. Like in the traditional sense, I'm not well educated. But one thing that I do know is, again, my life experiences, which are far and wide, and I've
Boom.
dealt with a lot of trauma and I've dealt with a lot of things, and I know emotions, and I know how to deconstruct my own emotions and how to be self-aware and how to talk about it. And that is something that I have a gift for, is like just being vulnerable about that and putting it out there. And especially with the direction that the world is going and like the US is going and stuff, like there's this big call to like bring the human element back into the paranormal community for me. And I'm like, that is my ultimate goal with this, is to bring ourselves back to it and like ground ourselves and like try to find ways that we can like actually help our community and help ourselves live a better life, because we only have one as far as we know. And then it's this big mystery. So it's like, if we can understand this phenomena more deeply in this way, I just think it could, I don't know, lend a lot more meaning to our life here.
I think so too. I think, my good friend Ren Collier gave a lecture in 2020 during COVID, and there's a lot of strife in the world, and he was like, during these times, you need to accelerate the weird for yourself personally. And that was like a call to arms for me, not to use a war term phrase. It's not what I meant. You know what I'm saying? It was a call to action is what I meant. But I thought that was so weird, or so great that, like, yeah, let's focus on, because like, we can't control what the powers that be are going to do, really. I mean, we can vote, but like, that only gets you so far. I voted my ass off a couple weeks ago, and it didn't didn't do a lot. But yeah, I think I'm so excited to see where you take this and how you use it in the field, because it did remind me. I think you're sniffing around at like such an important concept, kind of like the Oz factor that we mentioned earlier, where I remember when I first heard the Oz factor and then kind of applied it to the UFO experience, where so many contactees experienced this kind of like feeling of unreality.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, while it's definitely not the same thing, I think you are coming up with a concept that is going to be widely thought about and widely appreciated very soon.
Thank you.
Bravo to you. Bravo to you. I'm very excited about it. Yeah, of course.
I hope that people hear it and they resonate with it, and like, yes, I'm very excited about it, and this is definitely I feel as though I'm headed towards my life's work with it, so I'm very excited.
Yeah. I love it. Hey, would you mind talking to us, since your documentary, you don't have to give any spoilers, but can you tell us about the documentary and like the process about how it came about, and like who you were working with, and you said it took you 3 years to shoot. For a documentary, that is typical, folks, FYI. Like, you don't just go out for like, well, we have 2 weeks to shoot this thing. That generally doesn't work with a documentary when you can't force things to happen and you're not working with the script. But I'm always fascinated by production in these fields. So please tell us about that.
So it was the first project, like filming project, I'd ever taken on. ever, period. Like, had never been on camera before, and besides social media. And in 2020, I was connected with the director, Ryan Grulich, who at the time lived in Seattle and was the head of a company called PNTA, which was like a soundstage, like film production company for regional projects. And it was end of 2020, so he had been called to tell the story of the Lady of the Lake at Lake Crescent. The Lady of the Lake is Hallie Illingworth, and I can tell this part of the documentary because it's well-known knowledge, but Hallie Illingworth was a woman in like the 1940s or 1930s who was killed by her husband, and he wrapped her up in a rug, threw her in Lake Crescent, and he thought that she was going to sink, but the conditions in Lake Crescent actually ended up saponifying her body, so her skin and fat ended up turning into soap, and so she floated to the top of the lake a couple years later. And the documentary kind of digs into this true crime story, and then I also kind of take a journey throughout the entire film as someone researching it from a paranormal lens, from a history lens, and also kind of taking in the true crime story in itself. And then we explore a lot of other stuff having to do with Lake Crescent, because Lake Crescent has a lot of lore. It's very important to the indigenous community out there. Lots of weird stuff. And then I do end up investigating as well. And so, Ryan Grulich wrote it, produced it, and directed it with his small team, like a team of like 10, I think. Really, at the end of the day, it was like 10 people. And
that's a big team for a documentary.
It was big. Well, it was because it was his company too, and like they kind of all took it on as a passion project, especially like end of 2020 into 2021. Like, I feel like was like they were really creatively wanting to do something, and he had just felt like, I guess he had some synchronicities and some things that led him to this story. He reached out to me as a complete stranger, just like saw my work online, and I think I had maybe 10,000 followers, maybe less. But he found me and knew I was regional and liked what I was doing, and so I hopped on as a paranormal investigator, and it kind of ended up being like more or less about the hero's journey, like my journey through this story. And yeah, we took I think we did like 5 different shoots, and we shot and investigated over different seasons at Lake Crescent too. So it ended up creating a really, really cool, really cohesive story in the end. And then last year we premiered it at 3 different places. We premiered it at a theater in Seattle. We premiered it here in my own town of Spokane, and then we premiered it in Southern California as well. And then this year we just won some awards at a small film festival.
Hell yeah.
It's escaping me what festival it is, but finally it's coming out on TVOD to rent on December 17th.
What was that? Is it a streaming platform? TVOD?
Just VOD. Like
VOD. I thought you said TVOD. I was like, I haven't heard of that.
But no, just like for rent. So it's not going to be streaming, but it'll be for rent on Amazon Prime and anywhere else like that. And then I think, after that possibly Tubi. But yeah,
I love Tubi. I am so excited about this. Congratulations! How cool!
Thank you. Well, maybe I can get you a screener link. So.
Ooh, I would love a screener link.
I actually absolutely can get you one, so I'll send you one.
Thank you. Oh, I would appreciate that, Amanda. That's so nice of you.
Yeah.
Is making documentaries, or even like a documentary series, something you'd like to explore again?
Yes, absolutely. I did another documentary in January of this year, just with friends. And that was a much smaller scale, like just a week filming out in Brownsville, Pennsylvania. And then I just filmed in June with Amy Bruni and Sarah Lemos for a series that will come out in 2025.
Great.
But yeah, I was very excited to learn that with that first documentary, I loved it. And it turns out I love talking about myself. I love being on camera. Right. There's a very realness to that, and it shouldn't be.
Well, you have to love it if you're going to be good at it. You have to love it. I mean, that's for sure. 100%.
I was like, oh, cool, okay, I loved it, and I want to do more of it. I think it's a really great. I'm always operating from this place of like, how can I connect myself to more people? How can I experience more weird shit? and how can I get my ideas out there on a larger scale? And I've really enjoyed documentary work. I've really enjoyed any work on film, and that is definitely a good avenue for me to get some of these ideas and stuff out to a larger audience. So I've really enjoyed it, and I hope to do more of it.
I mean, I'm almost wondering, just pitching you an idea, this paranormal touch or emotive touch point, the PET. I mean, wouldn't that be a cool series to explore? You're putting yourself in different positions. I mean, I guess it would be hard to capture because you'd be waiting around to have a feeling. So
It
it
would
might
be
be
kind of hard to capture.
challenging. But
That might be a YouTube series or something.
yeah, it might be.
Yeah,
You probably have to turn your phone on right away when.
Yeah, but if anyone wants to do a property guardianship reality show, I'll gladly
Now
post it and investigate it. So
now you're talking. I mean, I would watch that. Even just, I mean, you could do it as a sitcom. The versatility with the property guardians is endless, folks.
Yeah.
Trust me. First off, thank you for so much time. This has been so fun getting to know you and hearing about this and your theories, and I'm just blown away. You're doing such great work. I want to ask you one question, though, because I love asking investigators this question. So, when you are investigating or experimenting, do you find that there's an uptick in synchronicities for yourself?
An uptick in what?
Synchronicities.
Oh, yes. Absolutely. I also happen to think that there's typically an uptick in synchronicities when we talk about synchronicities. So now probably this is going to kick that off. But, you know, it's interesting. I don't know that it's necessarily tied to investigating, but it is rather when I'm putting myself in a place where I'm focusing more on communicating with spirits or communicating with the other side, for some reason opens that door, and then synchronicities will typically come. Because like life ebbs and flows, you know, like life will get busy. I won't get to sit in my office and talk to ghosts as often, and you know, life goes on, and in those times I typically experience less synchronicity. But when I am more open to the other side, it does seem to kind of be a call to action on synchronicities, either small or large scale. So yeah.
It's interesting, yeah, because I think I'm pretty sure it was Carl Jung who said this, or it might have been Dr. Dean Radin. I can't remember because I'm stupid, but they said one of the two said when you're doing consciousness expanding research of any kind, you'll have uptick in synchronicities. I find that very interesting, and for myself, I feel like that has been the case. And I kind of wonder, Amanda. I mean, if the synchronicity is not a new term. It's been around for, probably a little under a century. But it's now, like liminality, kind of a buzzword and a word that, like, at least a lot of people in the community know, and even probably outside of the community. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering that if just the awareness of synchronicities will generate more synchronicities for people.
I absolutely think so. Yeah, I think that's totally possible. And like I said, when I start talking about synchronicities, and I've talked to some people in my own like smaller communities with people who are not into the paranormal, but when maybe I'm telling them about synchronicities for the first time,
right?
And then soon after that, I hear, oh my God, I'm having a synchronicity. And yeah, there's something to it. Like in my head, this is like a weird visual, but in my head, I just see like my brain opening up. That's like morbid, but like when you're exploring this stuff, I feel like my brain cracks open and like I start to just kind of mix with this river of consciousness, and that is where things like synchronicity happen. Like that's right. Things just get more serendipitous and odd like that. But yeah, and it is kind of a buzzword right now, and like it's also like used in like spiritual communities too, like because people see angel numbers and like people perceive what a synchronicity is differently, or maybe sometimes too with being online, that's hard to weed through what is a true synchronicity because like the algorithm is like literally showing you the same stuff, and and that's tough. But yeah, as we talk more about it, I think it's possible that more people will start experiencing it and other odd phenomena too.
Amanda Paulson, you have been a phenomenal guest. This has been so much fun. And like I said, folks, I will put links where you can find her, Amanda's work, because you're going to love it. It really, you are playing with a lot of great ideas, and you're never sitting there with a fixed belief system, telling the audience what it is. And I respect that and I love it. And I wish there were more of you out there, but I'm happy there's at least you. And the PET theory, like, I am so excited to see how that takes shape and form in your investigation and research. Please keep us all updated about that because it is so deeply fascinating. I love it. Amanda, where can people find more of your work?
I can be found at Pretty Effin' Spooky on all social platforms, and also prettyeffinspooky.com is where you can find more of my written work. And then, like I mentioned before, my documentary is coming out December 17th called The Lady of the Lake, and a series called Historically Haunted with Amy Bruni is coming out in 2025.
Hell yes, it's going to be a great year for you, and we are all very excited. One final question, and that is, you're West Coast, and maybe you had dinner, but maybe you didn't. What is for dinner, or what did you have for dinner?
I did have a little dinner. I had cheese dip and bread.
And what?
And bread. It's like a peasant
Yum.
dinner.
But that sounds great.
Yeah, I had cheese and bread.
Classic. Mm-hmm. Very French. I had some quinoa with peas and a side of hot cabbage and onions and chicken. It was weird. Cleaning out the refrigerator stuff.
It's very healthy. Good for you.
Yeah. Now I'm hungry for dinner again. That's the only problem. I'll have to have some ramen or something. Anyways, Amanda, thank you so much for your time. This is such a fun interview. I really, really appreciate it. Keep up the great work, folks. Thanks for listening to another episode of High Strangers. Enjoy your dinners, my friend. Talk to you soon. Peace.